Greetings from Silver Bay. I hope you are well where you are. Thank you for tuning in today and for being a part of what we're doing here at Silver Bay. My name is Bruce Tamlyn, and I'm recently retired from the chaplain's position at Silver Bay, and I'm grateful that Silver Bay has invited me back in a limited way to offer programs like this one. Today I'm in the library at Trinity House at Silver Bay, and with me is Austin Porth, Silver Bay's digital marketing media specialist, who is filming this. Again, thank you, Austin, for your support in this. And today is the fourth in a series of offerings that we are putting together that are part of what's called Inside Silver Bay. And if you're receiving that, you'll be receiving it because you're watching this. I hope you're benefiting from what we're providing on Inside Silver Bay. And this series of programs are being offered around this idea of making the most of this precious life. That's sort of the title of the whole series. There are two programs that are aired each month, about 20 to 30, 35 minutes. And the idea of this series is to think about this precious life that we've been given, this gift of life we've been given, and how to enhance that, how to make most of this gift that we've been given in life. And so before I get into this fourth topic today, towards this theme, I would like to just offer us an opportunity to do a short centering experience. And what I'd like to do is to have you suggest that you would find a comfortable chair where you are, and to have a moment to sit, and in sitting, just to feel the support of the chair, to feel the support of the floor, and that we'll just do a short centering exercise to kind of ground us before we enter into our program. And so what I'd like to start with is just to be aware. We're going to move up our body from our feet up into our head, and just feel where we might be holding tension in our body. And so let's just start with our feet and our ankles, lower part of our body, and just sense if you're holding tension there at all. Again, to let your feet sink into the floor, and the floor to support us, and the chair to support us, so we feel our body coming to a state of relaxation. And that as you move up your body from your feet to your ankles, to your lower legs, and I might suggest you close your eyes so you can focus on these specific areas of your body where you might be holding tension. As we move up our body, we can actually feel where consciously or unconsciously we're holding tension. Sometimes we find that we're holding tension in a certain part of our body that we were not even aware of. And so as we move from our lower legs up to our thighs, and then we move into our torso, and in our back, and our chest, and going down our arms into our hands, fingers, just allowing our body to relax, letting go of tension. And then as we continue to move up our body into our shoulders and into our neck area and up into our head, just allowing our awareness to let go of wherever we might be holding tension. And letting that tension go. And now what I suggest we do is just do a short breathing exercise that also helps us to, I think, release tension and stress and to more focus on the moment at hand, to be present. One of the ways of doing this is to focus on our breath. And focusing on our breath, what I would suggest is that in our mind's eye, we're conscious of our in-breath, our inhalation, and then our exhalation, our out-breath. And as we exhale, we would just say a comforting word in our mind's eye, silently as we exhale. So we might use the word love, or compassion, joy, health. Pick a word that is comforting to you. And again, to focus on our in-breath and aware of the breath coming into our lungs and our chest. And then as we exhale, saying the word that just is a comforting word in our mind's eye. And again, our in-breath, and then as we exhale, saying our word. So let us just do this together for a few minutes at your own pace, focusing on your in-breath and your out-breath. We'll do a couple more breaths together. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. So let me invite you to come back and open our eyes and just suggest you might do a centering exercise like this on a fairly daily basis, just to continue to deepen in your own journey and to come to know the beauty that's within us and the ability that we have to live into and experience all the glory and all the joy of the moment that we're experiencing. So thank you for doing this together. So we're continuing these sessions, and today's session, again, the overall theme of all of our sessions, making the most of this precious life, this gift of life we've been given. And again, I would be interested in your feedback, or if you'd like to communicate in any way, brucetamlyn@gmail.com. So today's topic is being of service to others. Being of service. Now, we're working on these. Last session we did 5 of the 10 core components of living a centered and joy-filled life. And the last component that we worked on in the last session was being of service. And I'd like to go into this topic of service to others in a little more depth. So that's why we're going to spend a whole session on this today. And then we'll pick up with the other 5 core components of living a centered life in our next session together. I did read this quote from Albert Schweitzer in our last session, but it's so appropriate I'd like to just remind us of it, or maybe you hadn't had a chance to hear this yet, but Albert Schweitzer, a doctor who established medical missions in Africa, he lived from 1875 to 1965. But here's what he says about service. He said this, and I quote, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know. The only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve." That's a good introduction to this idea of service for others that way. And so this idea of being of service to one another, I think it's an important topic because being of service to others helps us to get outside of ourselves. I think so many times I can, and maybe you can too, we sort of get caught up in our own life, caught up in our own issues. We get feeling anxious about this or anxious about that. And when we begin to get outside of ourselves and support somebody else, I think we begin to understand that life is fuller and richer when we have the opportunity to serve others, and I can get outside of myself. And so I'd like to read a story to you. Sometimes we use stories to tell ideas and to share concepts. And so this story comes to us today. It's called The Biker Wedding, and it's written by Brian Jones, and it's a true story. Brian Jones was the pastor of Christ's Church in the Valley of Philadelphia. And this essay first appeared in what's called Second Guessing God, that was published by Brian in 2006. I actually happened to read this essay in a version of Christian Century, an edition of Christian Century in April of 2006. And I read this story and I was deeply moved by it, and because it's such a great expression of what it means to be of service. And so let me read the story to you and then we'll reflect on it a little bit. Again, it's called Biker Wedding by Reverend Brian Jones. And Reverend Jones says this: "I've performed more wedding ceremonies than I can count. But there's one wedding that I will never forget. A woman who was not connected to our church had begged me to officiate at her wedding. She was 6 feet tall and spiked hair. Please, she pleaded with me, it's going to be a small ceremony, just friends and family at our house. When I showed up at the day of the ceremony, dozens of choppers, motorcycles, were parked in the front yard. Men with long handlebar mustaches wore black leather jackets covered with leather straps. The women with them looked as if they had just been picked up from a Las Vegas showgirl convention. People streamed into the house with a case of beer in one hand and a food dish in the other. Inside, I was greeted by heavy metal music and the haze of cigarette smoke. A woman noticed that I was the only one wearing a suit and screamed over the music, "You must be the pastor. Take a seat. We'll start in a few minutes." I looked around for a chair. avoiding the couple that was making out on the couch. Soon I sat down. The best man stumbled into the chair next to me and passed out. 40 minutes and 5 beers later, the bride's sister called everyone into the living room. A few guys propped up the best man against the wall, and someone hit the tape player. Misty Mountain Hop by Led Zeppelin. As the bride walked into the room, the guys hollered to one another. The lace of the wedding dress covered her massive arms, but couldn't hide the tattoos that stretched from her wrists up to her shoulders. I quickly delivered my standard wedding sermon, pronounced the couple husband and wife. Then someone screamed, "Let's party!" Within seconds, everyone in the room swarmed the couple with smiles and hugs and kisses. I waited my turn in line to congratulate them and explained that I did need to leave. But the father of the bride overheard me, grabbed my arm and yelled, "Let's make a toast." Someone handed out bottles of vodka and wine. The bride said, "I want to make a toast myself. I want to toast you guys. You are just like family to me." She looked over at her maid of honor and said, "Jackie, you're just like a sister to me." Jackie immediately stopped her and said, "No, you've always been a sister to me." With her arms around the bride's neck, she sobbed, "Do you remember when I lost my baby 3 years ago? I wouldn't have made it without you." Then she turned to the group and said, "Or without all of you. I wanted to die, and you gave me a reason to live." The bride continued, "Richard, when my brother passed away, you were there for me. You were driving a rig across country at the time, but still came over every weekend." Someone interrupted her. "You've been there for us too. When I lost my job, you brought groceries over to my house. You brought school clothes for my kids. I'll never forget that." This went on for 10 minutes. People shared stories of friends in the group who helped them buy cars when they couldn't get to work, who watched their children when they were in a pinch. One man told how 2 guys in the room picked him up from jail and let him live with them until he was able to afford his own place. After everyone finished, the bride looked around the room as she lifted her beer and said to friends, "I looked around the room and thought church should be like this." And I would like to add, neighborhoods should be like this. Communities should be like this. The world should be like this. So forgive me, but every time I read this story, I get a bit emotional. I think it speaks to me at a deep level, and I'm not exactly sure why, but it has something to do with the compassion shown in this story for those that didn't have a lot, but gave what they could and gave of themselves to one another. And so I'd like to lift up a few parts of this story for us when it comes to this idea of what does it really mean to be of service to others. Being of service to others, showing compassion, showing the opportunity that we can to really care for others. This idea of radical kindness, radical compassion, radical caring, that this story lifts up so beautifully. And I recall times in my own life when I was pretty down and out and not in a good place, and people came to support me, and I'll never forget that because I needed it most. And the people that showed up for me meant more to me than I can put into words. And maybe that's true for you too in your life. Maybe you can think of times when you were in a very difficult and challenging place and people were there for you. Back to our story for a minute. Again, the powerful line is the closing line from Reverend Jones when he says, "I looked around the room and thought, church should look like this." I'd like to lift up 3 specific aspects of the story that I believe can support us in living this joyful and grounded life, this gift of life that we've been given. The first aspect of the story is Reverend Jones, in a way, confesses his bias and his judgment of the biker culture. He's not comfortable with it, and he admits he wants to leave. And his observations at the beginning of the story really help us to understand his feelings about this whole wedding scene. And then as he hears their stories unfold, them helping one another, supporting one another, his perspective and attitude towards these people completely changes. Ending with, he wished his church looked more like this. The part that I want to take away from that story is that if in the story, like he said, he was going to leave right away, and the father of the bride grabbed him and said, "Let's make a toast," and he ended up staying, if he had left then, he would have missed the beautiful part of who these people were to one another. Well, I think the same can be true for us. That if we're in an environment that doesn't feel that comfortable, or we're not that comfortable with people or whatever, and we choose to leave, we might really miss who these people are. And so I'm guilty of this at times when I sort of project onto a certain group of people something about them that is pejorative in some way. And so, again, the first aspect of this is, let us look upon people, because they're human just like we are, and try to get to know them and not be biased or not be judgmental, but try to accept and come to understand who they are and what makes them who they are, and that we can begin to relate to them. I think the world would be a better place. So much of what is going on in the world today is this sort of making each other wrong or canceling each other. And I think this story lifts up this idea of take time to get to know others, especially those that are different than who we are. You see, there's something in us, I think, that to be living a more joy-filled life means to be less judgmental of others, not so quick to judge, not categories of better people or good people or not so good people or whatever. People are people, and to try to get to know them where they are. More patient with people, more willing to help, more willing to dialogue with those people that you feel like are maybe theologically in a very different place than you are, or politically in a very different place than you are. I think living a more joy-filled life is being secure enough in who we are and to be able to dialogue and talk and share, and being less judgmental. Number 2 out of this story, caring for one another, supporting one another. This is what this story, I think, captures so beautifully, that even though we might be challenged by some things, we have the capacity and the compassion to actually care for others and to attempt to support others and attempt to be with others in a way that might be helpful. How can I help? How can I support? I'm always hearing stories here in the Silver Bay wider community of people that are doing things for one another, taking a meal to somebody who's lost a loved one, or supporting those that may be living alone, there's just these beautiful expressions of people supporting one another, caring for one another. And the third thing about this story is that they not only have compassion for one another and care for one another, but they actually act on it. I think being service to others means that we have to be willing to act, willing to do something, not just think about it or not just have a thought about it, but actually make something happen. Not just speak about it, but to get up and to take action that way, as they do so beautifully in that story. You know, there's a story that I've told before at Silver Bay. It's by a former EMP. His name was David. And David had just finished his shift at work as an EMP at Silver Bay and the staff. And it was about 4:30, and he was heading down to go for a swim, had his towel and swimsuit and heading down for a swim at the end of the day. And the way down to where he was going to swim, he runs into this couple who asks him a question about where does the hiking trail start that goes to Jabe's Pond. And David starts to explain to them, well, it's up behind here, and if you go behind the administration building, and there's a pathway up that'll go across the road. And David basically discerns that they've never been to Silver Bay before, and this is their first time here, and they have no clue what he's talking about. So David then says to them, you know what, if you'd like, I'd be glad to take you there. And they were just thrilled in terms of that. So David goes back up to the dorm, changes into his hiking clothes, hiking boots, comes back down and meets them, and walks to Jabe's Pond with them and back. That's an act of service. I think that happens at Silver Bay a lot, where people, staff supporting staff, staff supporting guests, guests supporting staff, just this ability to serve one another becomes such an important part of our community that way. So in the end, I think we become deeper people. I think we appreciate life better. I think we come to understand the real value of our life and this ability to really become closer to this beautiful gift that we've been given in life when we come to understand that we can serve the needs of others. And this is where we come to find a real sense of joy in our life. So may you, may I come to know this beautiful gift of life through our capacity to support and care and reach out to others, to be of service to others. Thank you for listening to this today. Be well.